ever wondered how brands effortlessly carve out their space to make it in beauty and retail? Well, I'll tell you this, it's not just about following trends. My name is Monique, I'm an ex-retail buyer, and here on my channel, this is the place where business meets beauty. For today's video, I'm gonna dive into some of the things that I've learned along the way about how you can tap into Whitespace wizardry. If you're a brand enthusiast, an aspiring entrepreneur, a current business owner, or someone who just loves the beauty industry, check out this video as we dive deep into how brands can find Whitespace. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. Let's go ahead and dive deep into this idea of Whitespace wizardry. One of the things that I looked for consistently when I was working as a retail buyer was, how can I grow my category? The buyer job is the dopest job that I've ever had, and it was my third career. Maybe I'll get into the others at another time, but it was so cool because I not only got to find cool products and try to figure out how those products could weave into my current assortment plans, but I also was responsible for driving the business. The buyer job is not just about looking at fashion trends and trying to see what's cute. It's also about managing a P&L and really trying to grow that business to be profitable. And so I say that to say, when I put on my retail buyer hat, I wasn't just looking at what product was going to be dope or what product was going to be cool. That was very important as that drove sales. But I was also looking at what ways I could drive my business profitably. And Whitespace opportunities were a huge way for me to drive growth because they allowed me to typically tap into that P&L by partnering with new brands that could give me better margin and also get new product at the same time. So now that I've talked a little bit about how buyers work, let's go ahead and talk about how I identified Whitespace opportunities. Now, I was a buyer at two different retailers and I was a senior buyer, so I managed a good number of categories. When I was at Target, a mass retailer here in the US, I managed a $600 million business. And when I worked at Anthropologie, I managed a business that was about $20 million. As a reference, the numbers are really different, but know that my business at Anthro was the second largest business within the division. So the numbers are much smaller compared to Target, but it still had a significant presence, if you will. One way that I would look at Whitespace is identifying market gaps. And I think there's a couple of ways that you can look at identifying market gaps. The first is to say, what products am I missing? While I was at Target, my big claim to fame there is that I brought the brands This Is Elle and the Honeypot company to market. So when I say that, what I mean is I reached out to those founders. I said, hey ladies, I'm trying to grow my category. These are the areas that I'm interested in. Your product fits the areas that I think are Whitespace opportunities for growth for my category. Are you willing to partner with me as a retailer to help me grow? I looked at my category and I said, what's something that's working in other areas that might work in my area? I talked a little bit about partnering with This Is Elle and Honeypot Company, but I'll dive a little bit deeper. Okay, so story time. It was the year 2015. I just entered retail buying as a freshly minted graduate of the Tepper School of Business. I got my MBA, y'all. I'm going into buying. I have no idea what the job does, but I know I'm managing this P&L and I'm supposed to grow the business. I look at my category, which is menstruation. So I buy sanitary protection pads, I buy washes for the delicate areas, and I also buy, tampons, liners, all of those things. I also buy sexual health products and incontinence products, but we're going to just focus on the Sam Pro women's health side of things. As I'm looking at the category, I see that Target as a retailer at the time had been losing share for the past 2 years consistently. And what that means is the other retailers that we compete with were making more money than us. They were making decisions that were growing their business, and our decisions were causing our business to decline. And at the time, I was kind of a granola girl. I had used the Diva Cup once, but I knew that there were organic tampon options, and I was like, why aren't we doing this, Target? Come on. And I remember reaching out to some of the national brand partners and saying to them, hey, I think naturals is a really good opportunity for growth within this category. One of the national brands said, no, we don't think so. We think that the consumer is really loyal and she's not going to switch. And the other brand said, that's interesting, Monique. Let's see what we can do. We'll take this back to our team and we'll see what we can do. At the same time, I'm parallel pathing this and talking to brands that I know might have opportunities because, again, my goal is to grow my business. I am evaluated based on my ability to grow share. And so if you can't do it as a partner, I'm going to reach out to another brand partner because that's how buying works. So going back to the category, I had seen how naturals had grown the categories like cleaning and laundry detergent specifically, and then of course food, and how the organic naturals market was something that was able to really allow Target to thrive as a retailer. So it made total sense to me that if we brought natural products over to the fem care aisle, that the same thing would happen. It was like kitchen sink logic, like, come on, just makes sense. And so that's one way that I identified Whitespace as a buyer. I looked at my category and I looked at trends that I saw in other areas, and then I simply applied it to my category. In this case, the trend was people want natural items. And I remember the insight. People care most about buying natural products for things that are in them, and the next, things that are around them. And I joked and said, I don't know what's more in you than a tampon. I personally saw that this category was ripe for the pickings when it came to establishing naturals as a category for a presence within this segment. And so that's what I did. The benefit to this for the brands, right? Now, this is when I'm talking to my business owners, is that as a buyer, I was invested in naturals as a category. I saw naturals as a category that was going to allow me to hit my goals as a buyer, to help me grow share, to help me grow my business, to help me increase my profit and loss, which is going to make me look fantastic as a buyer and then get promoted, right? And so that means that when I reached out to brands like This Is Elle, when I reached out to Talia, when I reached out to B, I was looking at them as long-term partners for growth because I believed in my idea and I knew it was going to work. Now, thankfully, you can see 8 years later, I was right. and my investment and my bets, if you will, were accurate. But that is one way to look at Whitespace. Always know what's important to your customer. Now, in this scenario, your customer is actually the retailer. This is where a lot of brands and even folks who are beauty enthusiasts don't necessarily understand the intricate relationships that retailers have with brands. Retailers obviously carry brands. We as consumers know that because we go to the stores and we see them. But what we don't realize is that the retailer really holds a lot of the power in those relationships because the retailer is the one who decides what products go on the shelf. So as a retail buyer, I get to decide if brand A sits on the shelf or if it doesn't. And so it's important to not say, well, this retailer should want me because I'm amazing, but to also say what's important to the retailer so that they would want me on their shelves. So here are some things that were important to me as a retail buyer when I was looking at launching or bringing in new brands. Number one, margin. Okay. I shared a little bit earlier that as a retail buyer, I was responsible for the whole profit and loss of my category. And so what that means is I'm not just looking at what new items I want to bring in, but I also am looking at what the margins are and how fast these items are going to sell. Because at the end of the day, I'm trying to make money, honey. I know that's not necessarily something that brands think about, but it's important. You're selling, yes, to a consumer, and that's what's going to drive your revenue. And that'll also in turn drive revenue for the retailer. But some of those other things that are important to retailers does include margin. And at the time when I was bringing in This Is Elle and the Honeypot company, that was a time when a lot of newer brands were able to provide margins that were accretive. That's the word that we would use. It just means higher than margins from a lot of the national brands. But for you that's trying to launch new items, know that margins are important and that that's something that you as a new brand can bring to the table that is beneficial to some of the heritage or legacy brands that are already there. Another benefit to the retailer when you're looking at bringing in a new brand is being able to target a new consumer. So when I'm talking about the consumer, this is the end user who's buying the product. If there was, for example, a guest a customer that was walking into my doors at Target who was previously not going down my aisle because I didn't offer any natural products for menstruation and for everyday washing and hygiene, then they might go to Whole Foods and find those products there. So by offering the products at Target or at fill in the blank retailer, I'm now widening their pie when it comes to market share growth and giving them new customers or new consumers that they can buy from. So that's something else that was really important to me as a buyer. Those are the two really big things that matter when it comes to understanding what's important to a retailer when it comes to white space. When you're talking about white space and how you're looking at identifying things, I think there's a few ways that you would look at it. And I'm going to start with one of my favorites, which is category. Now, when I say category, if you're in retail, you know what I'm talking about, okay? And if you're not in retail, you don't know. So let me break it down because I know this channel is intended to be for entrepreneurs, for brand enthusiasts, so people who might not be familiar with the business side of beauty and retail. When I was a retail buyer, I often was referred to as a category manager. So I had a specific set of categories that I bought for, and those were the categories that I was responsible for. Within that, there might be subcategories. So for example, if I'm the skincare buyer, within skincare, there might be cleansers, serums, moisturizers, masks. You get the drift, right? Those are all of the different subcategories that sit within a category. A perfect example of a new category entrant and creating white space is Hero Cosmetics. Hero Cosmetics saw a white space opportunity in applying patches to skincare. That was something that had yet to be done in the US. And the founder Ju saw this as an opportunity happening in Korea and simply brought that idea over to the US, created a new white space, and boom, now patches are growing like wildflowers when it comes to the skincare category. So that's a great example of looking at a category and that being an opportunity for white space identification. If you aren't inside the skincare category, there are a variety of other examples of new white space entrants. Think when Shea Moisture started offering twisting butters and curling butters for textured hair. Think about aerosol deodorants when they went from sticks and bars to sprays. Some things are older and aren't necessarily new, but new category entrants and identifying white space by looking at the category can come in a variety of different ways. We see they can come in form when we think about things like deodorant. They can come in new product items when we think about things like twisting butters, or think about root touch-up. Ooh, season 3, episode 4. I'll post a link to the podcast episode that I'm referencing. I sat down with my friend Kristen to talk about consumer insights, and she talked about how they developed the product of root touch-ups by looking at the consumer insight that showed that women were keeping their hair color, and when it got to the bottom, they were actually using it to touch up their roots. And so that's when they said, oh, there's an opportunity for us to just sell root touch-ups, right? So that's looking at a consumer behavior and then applying that as a white space opportunity. If you are a brand founder and maybe you don't have a whole lot of money, that's okay. You can still identify new consumer opportunities because you are a consumer who's living in the world. There are things that you might be able to identify because of your lived experience that make you think there are products that don't do the things that I need them to do, or there are better ways for us to do the things that I'm doing with the current products that I have. And that's how I'm going to identify white space and how I'm going to tackle and launch this new product. Category and consumer are two really great options to identify white space opportunities. Category and consumer are two additional fantastic ways to identify white space opportunities. The last item that I'm going to touch on when identifying white space opportunities is shopping the retailer. Now, you might be going, what the heck do you mean, Monique, shopping the retailer? What I mean is that white space is relative. White space is relative. Yo, I'm shopping bars over here. What do I mean when I say white space is relative? Going back to the idea of the retail buyer being a customer for you if you are a brand, right? That retailer has their own assortment. And every retailer's assortment is slightly different. What's sold at Sephora is different than what's sold at Ulta Beauty. And if you have a product that might already be offered at Sephora, but Ulta Beauty doesn't have it, maybe there's an exclusive partnership with a brand that has that product that's at Sephora. And maybe you have something to offer that's very similar to what's already at Sephora, but if you approach Ulta Beauty, they'll say, that's still Whitespace, we're still really excited about it, we want your brand. Because they don't have access to that brand that's at Sephora, or because they just really like your brand in and of itself. So remember, Whitespace is also relative. It's relative to what that retailer is offering and what their priorities are and what's important to them. And that's another way that you can tackle Whitespace and look at your product and try to identify if that could be an area of opportunity for your brand. So that's everything for the video today. I hope that you found this information helpful. If you did, please leave a comment. Tell me, what are some new products that you think have identified Whitespace that you're excited about? Thank you for listening and watching, and I'll catch you on the next video. Bye. Okay, maybe I'm gonna roll credits. Do I think I'll roll credits for this? I don't know. I feel like, no, why do outtakes matter? Outtakes matter because people can see. All right, okay, this is it. That's the video.